We are live on YouTube now, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. I make it 2:30 and I gather we're on YouTube, so we're live, as they say. Welcome to this meeting of the Rushcliffe Borough Council Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Roger Upton, the chairman of the committee, and with us this afternoon on my left, your right, Councillor Maureen Stockwood, my vice chairman, and I believe present are Councillors Bailey, Gowland, Gray, Healy, Mason, Purdue-Horan, Thomas, and I think there are some apologies and substitutes. So if I could ask Tracy Coop to give those, please.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillor Clark, and we have Councillor Butler as a substitute, and we have apologies from Councillor Price, and Councillor Jones is substituting. Thank you.
Thank you. And officers present, I believe, Leanne Ashmore, the Director of Development and Economic Development, Andrew Ashcroft, the Interim Service Manager for Planning, our guest, Richard Barlow of Brown Jacobson, and his colleague, I forget the name, escapes me, but Sophie Hoffman, thank you. And Tracy Coop from Democratic Services, and planning officers to my right, Paul Taylor, Emily Dodd and Matt Hilton, who will address their respective reports. The usual housekeeping issues, if I may. No fire alarm is expected this afternoon. If it does go, we leave by the fire exits to the assembly point in the front of the car park. Anybody in doubt, then follow us and we'll hopefully be there. Mobile phones, the usual thing, if you could put them on silent, be appreciated. I don't anticipate the meeting's going to be that long. You never know. If anybody's desperate for public toilets, they are through the foyer and the rear wall. If it goes on too long, we will have a comfort break. But as I say, I don't think it's going to be that onerous this afternoon, looking at the agenda. The second item on the agenda is the usual declaration of interest. And you'll see on the agenda, I think it was last month when we had the report on the County Council about the East Leek application of primary school there. So I say where the Borough Council is a consultee, as is this the case for a County Council application, then any County Council members, of which I know myself and 3 colleagues here, and for that matter, ward members, don't need to step down from the committee, but you should declare their interest, and I'll do that in a minute, as a county councillor for this application, and confirm that you will consider the application with an open mind during the debate as it unfolds, and not with any predetermined view. I certainly, as I did last time, will be leaving the chamber. It is the last item on the agenda, so my vice chairman Maureen Stockwood will take that item. Are there any other declarations? I can see the hands going up. Councillor Butler, Councillor Gowan and Councillor Purdue-Horan as fellow councillors. Do you want to comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, you've said it all, really. I think it's a slight case of deja vu. I declare a non-pecuniary interest in the East Leek application because I'm the member of the County Council Planning Committee as well as being a county councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Purdue-Horan.
Same here, Mr. Chairman. A non-pecuniary interest as a member of the County Council Planning and Rights of Way Committee.
And Councillor Gowan.
Non-pecuniary interests as a member of the County Council, and I'll approach this with an open mind.
Thank you. Are there any other declarations under the Code of Conduct or the Planning Code? Councillor Thomas.
It's the East Leek application. I'm the ward member, but I don't think I'm required to. I think I'm able to take a part in the meeting. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. No, that's right. So item 3, the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 11th of November this year. Are members of the committee agreed that these minutes are correct? And if so, could I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Proposer, Councillor Mason, seconder, Councillor Jones. Thank you. Sorry, yeah, my apologies. We'll move on to item 4 of the agenda. It's so easy to forget to press the button, isn't it? On and off all the time. On this afternoon's planning applications, but for the benefit of the public and the wider audience, could I remind members that I assume you've read the reports and try not to repeat the same points if we can, keep them concise and relevant, but it is a quasi-judicial meeting and we should conduct it with the appropriate professionalism and behaviour that material planning issues really should be only debated in this forum. So we note the report of the Director of Growth and Economic Development, which gives us an overview of the planning process and the applications we're looking at this afternoon, and takes me to the first application, which is reference 21/01636/full. Chairman, I will read it. The Old Rectory Church Lane Widmerpool, erection of 2 number polytunnels for the growing of flowers. I have been asked to read that Councillor Andy Edivine, one of the ward members, has told me that he no longer objects to this application, and would I read that out before the debate? So with no more ado, I'll pass over to the case officer, which I believe is Matt. So if you take us through it, and then when you've done that, we can, well, I don't believe there are any late representations. There's no late representation. The floor is yours, and Matt. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay. So the application seeks planning permission for 2 polytunnels in connection with a cut flower business. So the application site is located on the western edge of Widmerpool, located to the north of Weissel Road. Site comprises a field located to the rear of the old rectory. So the old rectory itself is a Grade 2 listed property, but that is some distance from the site of the proposed polytunnels. The polytunnels will be sited to the southwest corner of the site, as you can see here. Site comprises paddock land, open countryside outside of the green belt. Members are advised that there is a tractor store, glass house and raised beds to the southeast corner of the site, which aren't shown on the indicative OS plan. I've just got an aerial photo of the site here. So I'm just going to take you through some photos of the application site. So this is a view from Weissel Road, southern boundary site. There's a dense screen of trees and hedgerow, so very limited views into the site. This is a view of an entrance that has been formed from the southwest corner of the site off Weissel Road. And this is a view from within the site, looking back towards the entrance at the southwest corner, an old redundant polytunnel here, and a structure here which has recently had planning permission for conversion into a store with recladding and a new roof on top, also as part of the cut flower business. And then this is a view into the site. The proposed polytunnels will be sited on the left-hand side here as you look into the site. And this is a view back towards the site of the proposed polytunnels, which will be just in the far distance. And then another view towards that southwest corner of the site. And then this is a view along the rear boundary. So the polytunnels will be sited just where this hard standing is here. And this is a view just across to the northern boundary of the site. So towards the rear, there is a pond and a sort of meadow area and some mature planting. And then this is a view looking back towards the old rectory, the host property, which is in the distance. This is a tractor store which previously had planning permission. And then there is also a glass house which has been recently approved, and raised beds. Like I say, these are located the southeast corner of the site, and they're all in connection with the same cut flower business. And then just another view of the raised beds and glass house. So the polytunnels, as you can see, site close to the southwest entrance of the site. There would be 3.4 meters in height, fairly temporary structures, standard polytunnel structures. Main consideration with this application is the location in the open countryside and compliance with policy 22 of the Rushcliffe Local Plan Part 2. This policy does set out appropriate forms of development in the countryside, and it does include appropriate rural businesses, the expansion of rural businesses that are small scale, and employment generation. So looking at these structures, like I said, they're 3.4 meters in height, and given the boundary screening, the tree screening along Weissel Road and very limited views into the site, there would be very little, if any, public view of the polytunnels. They are obviously of a modest scale. And given the distance from the listed property, the old rectory is here, polytunnels are here. Given the separation distance, there isn't an impact on the setting. They're not intervisible in views of the listed building, so it wouldn't result in harm to the setting of the host property. Just in terms of the sort of degree of permanence of the polytunnels, members are advised that if you were minded to support the application, then we do propose a condition requiring a removal of polytunnels should the cut flower business use cease, so that they don't remain there in the long term. And just finally, I want to draw your attention to the officer report. Just after paragraph 27 of the report, there are some bullet points which set out that the proposal would not constitute a material change of use of the land, as it would still comprise an agricultural type of use. Therefore, for the reasons I've set out, the application is before you with recommendation to grant planning permission subject to the conditions.
Thank you. We have no speakers on this item, so it's straight into the debate and hopefully to make a decision. Who wants to start the ball rolling? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think I'll prolong things too much, but one of the photographs showed what appeared to be existing polytunnels. Am I correct in that? That was an actual photograph of something there at the moment. So, right. And yeah, okay. I just wanted to clarify that. You know, I think I remember, it must be 30 odd years ago, when that pond was created, and it was fascinating at the time, and that's sort of blended in very naturally now. And as we saw from the photographs too, I mean, you can't really see it from the road, and you certainly can't see it from the rectory, which is a considerable distance away. So personally, I don't really see any objection to this. So unless I'm being a little bit premature here, I'm happy to move the recommendation to approve.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. I already got some indications to speak from Councillor Thomas, and then Councillor Jones and Councillor Mason and Councillor Gray. So anyway, Councillor Thomas first.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This seems to be one of these application sites where things come in dribs and drabs and retrospective applications and so on. And before you know where you are, you've got something that's completely different from the thing you started out with. I think there's a plot of what is purportedly paddock or agricultural land appears at some ends of it to be used. You know, there's a swimming pool been built in one corner, for instance, and I think it would be quite useful to know where the garden stops and the agricultural land starts. But you know, I don't know if that's a relevant material consideration in this case. The other thing that might be worth considering would be some sort of protection on the hedge so that it isn't actually visible. It isn't at the moment, but that hedge, of course, hedges can go. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to respond?
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. I'm just going to pull up the site plan to show the position of the residential curtilage and where that ends. So I'm afraid it's not particularly clear, but to the, I can see my mouse on there, to the top of the site, there is the swimming pool building here. The boundary of the residential curtilage, as I'm aware, runs effectively from this corner to the north, and then it does step out to include the swimming pool building. That was a former tennis court that was associated with the old rectory, which was replaced with a swimming pool building a couple of years ago. So I understand that the curtilage runs approximately along this boundary here. Everything beyond that is outside of domestic curtilage, it's paddock land. I appreciate that there have been a number of applications on this site at the same time. We have to consider the application that's before us, and you know, the use proposal for polytunnels for a cut flower business, regardless of the other applications and retrospective applications on the site.
Okay, thank you. Does that answer your query, Councillor Thomas?
Yes, thank you. And it's almost like Andrew Pegram's in the room, isn't it? When people say we must consider the application in front of us.
Councillor Jones, I think, was next.
Thank you, Chair. I've got one query which is in paragraph 1. At the end it says there is a gravel access track leading from Weissel Road for which retrospective planning permission is now sought. And I don't know whether that's wrongly placed there or whether that's an additional condition, or surely should be. And when it comes to the condition to remove it when the business ceases, I think we're very aware that microplastic contamination in the earth is said now to be worse than in the sea. So I'm just wondering whether there should be an additional condition. Is should the polytunnel start to deteriorate, it must be removed.
Okay, 2 points.
In a safe manner. So
Yeah,
that's a
2 points there. Yeah.
additional condition. I don't know if there's a problem with it in principle, total, but I just think those two issues need tidying up.
So it's the gravel drive and disposal sometime in the future of the polytunnel.
If the polytunnel starts to deteriorate, because like you may well have seen, there's fields where you see a polytunnel that was, but it's plastic flapping about. So it's not just about the business finishing, it's about deterioration in the plastic. It should be removed safely.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. So with regards to the gravel track, I can confirm there is a separate application, retrospective application that's currently pending consideration. So that hasn't been determined yet. That is, I guess, separate to the application for the polytunnels, although it is, I guess, taken off the very start of that track. It is a very much separate consideration to what we're looking at here, which is sort of directly linked to the cut flower business. I mean, with relation to the potential deterioration of polytunnels, they are to serve a business purpose, and I'd assume that once they start to deteriorate, they would look to renew them at that point. But yes, I'm not quite sure how we would.
Yeah, it was the disposal of the plastic. Well, you could put that as a planning condition. I don't know if, Andrew, have you a view on that?
I think it's an issue about whether it would relate to the use of land, and probably it wouldn't. Plainly, it would be environmentally sensitive to encourage that to happen, and perhaps we could put it as a note to applicant, but it doesn't feel as though it would be a binding planning condition as such.
Yes, I think that's a reasonable compromise, isn't it? Put it in the note to the applicant about future disposal rather than a condition.
I suspect the parish council might want to keep an eye on that.
Councillor Mason.
Thank you. I was just going to second the recommendation.
Thank
to
you.
accept the proposal.
We'll keep your two pending then. And Councillor Gray has a question, no doubt.
So my question is on the recommendation on number 3, whether how reasonable the timescale is. It being removed within 1 month of ceasing trading of the business. I think anyone who's dealt with builders in recent times knows that that's quite a short time frame. Whether we should extend that to maybe 3 months to be more reasonable.
Have you a chance to collect your thoughts on that? Number 3, you say, didn't?
Number 3.
Condition 3 of that.
Yes, condition to be returned to its former condition within 1 month of the use ceasing.
Yeah.
Seems like quite a short time frame, especially when you're wrapping up a business.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. I mean, they are obviously they're very, I guess, lightweight structure. We're not talking about sort of bricks and mortar here. That's all I could really say in terms of that that condition. I don't know if Andrew, you wants to add to that at all.
Chairman, yes, if I can just add to it, given the relatively modest size of what they would be in any event, and given the relatively limited method of construction, I've seen polytunnels of that nature being erected in matters of hours, and therefore to expect them to be dismantled and removed from site within a month of ceasing of trading seems very reasonable.
Happy with that, Councillor Gray?
My only concern was that it's not just the polytunnels, but also areas of hard standing, which so if there was a more permanent feature around the edge of those, in concrete or brickwork, that's not an afternoon job.
Again, Chairman, in my experience, there's probably very limited, if any, hard standing around these polytunnels, so that for the circumstances which have been raised, almost certainly won't arise.
Thank you. Councillor Healy and then Councillor Thomas. I didn't think this item was going to take such a debate, frankly, of polytunnels, but here we are.
Thank you, Chairman. My question really is just based on a comment by the parish council. They feel that the site is being overdeveloped and possibly requires a change of use application. Now, reading my notes, it's quite clear, or it's made clear, that no retail activity is going to be carried out on site or customers visiting the site. So I'd be interested, in to know how they operate their business, which I assume they're currently doing anyway, based on the site itself. Thank you, Chair.
Well, interesting question there about the cut flower business. I presume it's not trading. They cut the flowers and send them to retail or wholesale.
Yes, it's not. There's no trading from the site. You understand that they collect the cut flowers sort of once a week or so, and then a van takes them to market or wherever they're being sold off site. So there isn't any public access into the site.
Councillor Thomas again.
Yes, sorry to prolong the discussion, Chair, but there's 2 points that have arisen from the questions. The first one is the business of access, which is in a separate planning application. So if we approve this, we're approving them without any access, if that application hasn't been approved. I'm just not wondering, and the red line actually shows, does that show the access point in there? I'm just wondering if we need some sort of linking of these two applications so that we don't approve polytunnels that have got no access. And the other question is this business of retail. And again, maybe that should be a condition or an advisory note that there is no approval for any retail operation on the site. I'm just mindful of the fact that this is one of those applications that grows like Topsy, basically, and becomes something else before you know what you've got. Thank you.
2 questions there. I think whether we should link this application to one that's already been received and being looked at on the roadway, which I suspect not. We have to look at the one that's in front of us, end of. And the second point was again about, could we consider putting a advisory note about not selling flowers on the site, no retail operation to be undertaken on the site, I think.
I'm not sure whether you could do that, strictly speaking, or whether it would be enforceable. Would it not be better if permission is given as per now or any other conditions, then if retail started on that site, that would surely be a case for some sort of enforcement or retrospective application in the future. I mean, we're making too many assumptions here, I think, of what might happen. So could we be accidentally making this far more complicated than it probably needs to be, I wonder?
I do tend to agree with you, yes. Hold on, I've got a wave of hands coming up now, unbelievably so. I know, I should never have said it. Councillor Jones.
Councillor Thomas raised the issue about the protection of the hedge. And I'm not sure we've got a conclusion on that or whether that should be a condition. But I mean, other than that, I'm happy to move its approval, but I think the protection of that hedge affects the view quite considerably.
If it's any help, Mr. Chairman, going back to show my age now to when that pond was first established, which is a natural, what is now a natural pond, it used to be fascinating me. I know it sounds a bit sad, but it used to fascinate me as you walked or drove along that road. You could stare over and look at the pond. You can't do that now because the hedge is so tall and so thick. So the hedge is really, really well established. And I would suggest as well that the only people going along that road at that point were probably in their cars, with the exception of some cyclists. So the chances of anyone actually getting a really close look at the polytunnels, I would think, is remote. So whether it's, I don't really don't think it's necessary, knowing that hedge, know what it's like, to actually put a protection in. And again, I think it's probably making things a little tad complex, but that's just my opinion.
No, very, very valid comments, and I think I tend to agree with you on that one. We can over egg this one if we're not careful. There was somebody else indicated, Councillor Bailey. Yeah.
Thank you. I noticed that the Highways Authority, Notts County Council, doesn't object to this. Now, are they not objecting to it? On what access to this land are they not objecting to? Because there's no plan permission yet for the access.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. So just in response to that, the application that's pending consideration is for the driveway itself running across the site. And so there was a form of access to the rear prior to that driveway being installed. But we have to remember is it's not a change of use or essentially a particular sort of intensification of the access, given that there is already a cultural business taking place there. So I expect Highways, that's why they haven't raised an objection.
Okay, and I just picked up the officer's advice that it's not a change of use. And we are looking at purely the application in front of us today of the polytunnels. So I think we need to come back to that and make a decision if we can. Anybody else wants to speak? No, right. Well, we have a valid proposal from Councillor Butler, seconded by Councillor Mason, I believe, which could take us to the vote, if we're prepared to do the vote. Right, all those in favour of the recommendation to approve the application, please raise your hands. That's unanimous. Thank you. Takes us to item 2 on the agenda, which is, bear with me, reference 21/02345/ Chestnut Farmhouse, Chestnut Lane, Barton in Fabis. The erection of new outbuilding with mezzanine level, and this is retrospective. Who wants to? Are you doing this one?
Thank you, Chairman.
No, doing the second one. Over to you then. There's no speakers again, so straight into the presentation, and then we can have the debate.
Okay, yes, thank you, Chairman. So members are advised that there are no late representations for this application. The application seeks retrospective planning permission for a brick outbuilding for the use of storage of machinery, equipment and materials associated with an arboricultural and grounds maintenance business that currently operates from the site. Okay, so the application relates to a site to the northern edge of Barton Paris, comprising a former farmyard, which is in use for this grounds maintenance business, comprising an area of hard standing with a traditional brick barn along the northern edge. Adjoining this is the retrospective barn subject to this application, and then there is also a portal framed agricultural building on that northern edge. The site falls within the green belt. It's also within flood zone 3, so high flood risk area. Then we've got an aerial photo of the application site. The main farmyard has outline planning permission for up to 5 dwellings. However, having visited the site yesterday, it is still clearly very much in use for the arboriculture and grounds maintenance business, with the main farmyard being used for parking and the storage of equipment. So I'm just going to talk through some photos of the site. So this is a view up Chestnut Lane across the front of the application site, which is on the right-hand side. So in the corner, you can just see the existing brick barns. And then this is a view into the site. So the building subject to this application is the one towards the end is slightly taller than the original brick barns. View again into the application site, showing the former farmyard area, just an area of hard standing used for parking and storage. And then another view into the site, got open fields beyond that. And then just a view sort of southward across the front of the application site again. And so the application building is the taller building at the back there, that brick building. Another view across the front of the building, and then a view sort of face on. And then you've got existing agricultural building at the end there. So the building is currently, it is in use for the storage of equipment and for parking at ground floor level. There is a mezzanine floor in use for the dry storage of materials associated with the grounds maintenance business. Just go forward to the application plan to show that. So, okay, so this is a plan of the building as built. See the mezzanine floor, because they used for storage. Just one point I want to raise, Chairman, is that although the site is within a high flood risk area, it is classified as being of low vulnerability to flooding due to its use for storage rather than as domestic accommodation or any other use. And if members were minded to recommend approval, we would seek a condition restricting the use to storage in relation to the horticultural business and not for any other purpose, such as residential accommodation. So in terms of residential amenity, just go back a couple of slides. So this is the view from the adjacent property to the north at number 18 Chestnut Lane. And you can see that there is a tennis court that abuts the building abuts a tennis court. It is taller than the building it replaced, but it is some distance from the actual residential property or their main garden area. Just going to see if we can get a clearer plan of that. So the shaded building there is the application building, and the top left-hand corner is the neighbouring residential property. So it is of officer's view that because of the distance, there wouldn't be an undue overbearing or overshadowing of this neighbour. Like I said, the site does fall within the green belt. However, when we look at the surrounding built form, if I just go to the location plan, there are various properties that project further eastward than the building in question. So to the north, we've got the old stables, and then to the south, we've got properties on New Road, which extend further eastward. So given its position within the site between two existing buildings and the surrounding built form, we consider that it is a form of limited infill within the built area, therefore falling under an exception to inappropriate development in the green belt. So just in terms of visual appearance, the building did replace an old corrugated metal barn and various other structures, and it is of the officer's view that the replacement structure is of a visual improvement on the former building, which is probably more akin to the barn you can see on the right, but of a smaller scale. And from the photos from the front of the site, clearly it has very limited presence from public views from Chestnut Lane, and it is not visible apart from potential glimpses from New Road. It is pretty much hidden from public view from the south. So on that basis, the reasons that I've presented, the application is before you with a recommendation to grant planning permission subject to the conditions set out.
Thank you. Again, we have no speakers, so it's straight into the debate. And who would like to start the debate? Councillor Thomas, didn't see your hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, a few things. Where are the houses proposed, and would there be any, or is this building impact on the amenity for those houses, or has that planning application now expired? And what would be the process if they wanted to convert the house? I mean, it's a very nice barn, isn't it? What would be the process if they wanted to convert it into a dwelling, given the condition that's been put on it? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. I'm going to pull up the site plan again, just to get a bit of an overview. So I confirm there is an outline planning permission for up to 5 houses on the main farmyard area to the south of that building. That permission is still valid. It hasn't expired. We haven't received a reserve matters application yet, so we can't speculate about the or look at the, I guess, go into detail about design or impact on amenity on that front. So it really depends whether they choose to submit a reserve matters or continue with the current use for grounds maintenance. In terms of the question of conversion, I think there are potentially a number of issues if they were to look at residential conversion. And we have to look at the applications before us, but if they were to look at it, we'd have to look at factors such as flood risk, potentially having to raise the floor levels, and there are various other considerations. And that is why we have proposed the condition that it shall be tied to the use of the business and not for residential purposes, because in its current form, potentially it may not be suitable for residential accommodation.
Okay, Councillor Jones. Councillor Jones.
Yeah, a question on the similar line, really, which is we're not being told where the existing approved application lies. So you've not provided us with a map or a chart showing where the existing approval is vis-a-vis this. So that feels to me like we're being given partial information. And I'd noticed the same thing, you know, that there's approval for 5 dwellings. So can you at least indicate on that map the extent of those 5 dwellings that are already approved?
Have we just got outline or detail? And if it's outline, you can't really.
That's correct. It is. So thank you, Councillor Jones. It is outline permission, and it was, I think, all matters except access reserved from what I recall, but certainly in terms of the layout, that wasn't a matter that was considered at outline stage. And so for that,
we don't know the area even.
So although we know the confines of where the proposed houses would be, so we know that they would be within the, they've applied for a residential development of up to 5 houses within this farmyard area, within the red line area of the outline plan. And they did provide indicative layout plans. They are purely indicative, and you know, so if a reserve matters comes in, they may vary from what was on those plans. Just for information, indicative plans showed that the dwellings would have extended further eastward than this building. I understand there would have been a kind of spur road coming in here, so the dwellings would have been set back from this building, but clearly it was outline, and we can't really speculate about what may or may not come in at reserve matter stage, or the changes in design and layout at that stage.
Thank you. Councillor Gray.
Just looking at the some satellite images, it seems that the building that's been replaced was also adjacent to a couple of sort of roofed covered areas, so the parish council and ward council seem to have objected to the size and massing based on just the building that was replaced rather than those areas as well. So I think including those, it looks like it sits on I suppose a similar footprint, even if the height is different. I think although we're not considering the effect it might have on the outline planning permission to the south of this, sort of point out that this would be to the north of the site, and again probably wouldn't really affect. Not that we're considering that, but wouldn't really affect that development in my eyes. So I'd be minded to move the recommendation on this, yeah, I would support that.
Thank you. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm actually minded to second that recommendation, but just commenting in general that I know we all get a little bit cross and frustrated, even though we're not supposed to, the fact when we're dealing with a retrospective application, but it could be argued that one advantage of a retrospective application is the fact at least you know what it looks like in reality, as opposed to having to look at plans that aren't always necessarily clear. And I have to agree with what colleagues have said, that the design and detail of this building is remarkably good for what is going to be a storage area, and just happens to be attached to the residential dwelling. But there we are, we've got the application in front of us that we have. It's interesting to note that the correspondence or comments from others, I know the parish council objects, but the neighbours, there's no objection from neighbours. And in fact, 3 neighbours are supporting the application and pointing out the material. Indeed, materials are in keeping with the surrounding area, visual improvements, etc. So I think, yeah, and we've got the condition on the recommendation that it can only be used for storage of machinery, equipment, and materials in connection with the agricultural and grounds maintenance company, and shall not be used for residential occupation or for any other purpose. I think that's quite clear. As I say, I'm being slightly tongue-in-cheek when I refer to a benefit of retrospective. I mean, I'm no fan of retrospective applications. It's quite naughty, really. But we are where we are. We've got it, and there's a lot of detail there. So I think, yes, I'm happy to second the recommendation with those conditions in place.
Thank you, Councillor. But I've got Councillor Gowan.
Am I right in understanding this contravenes the Greenbelt policy? If so, I object. Because I can think of all the places we've refused it in the past for non-retrospective, people wanting to put in, you know, things to create employment, and they've been forbidden to do it. If this contravenes the Greenbelt policy, it contravenes the Greenbelt policy.
Could you respond?
Thank you, Councillor Gand. So the site is within the green belt, and we have assessed it under paragraph 149 of the MPPF, which lists exceptions to inappropriate developments. And we have looked at it in terms of whether it constitute limited infill within the green belt or within a settlement in the green belt. And it is the officer's view that it would constitute limited infill within the built fabric of the village, and therefore an exception to inappropriate development.
Thank you. I don't, Councillor Healy.
Thank you, Chair. So at the risk of perhaps repeating some comments that have been made, I'm not a great fan of retrospective applications either. And I don't quite know how we can address that going forward, but that's for another time. The building itself, I mean, it's got a first floor, it's got a maze, the previous building didn't. So the footprint is substantially larger. Now, surely there must have been an obligation on the developer or the builder to work within the footprint that was there originally. But why should a single floor building suddenly be acceptable as a two-story? And again, noting some of the comments, yeah, it would lend itself very well to a residential conversion, but hopefully we can address that.
Well, my understanding is you need to differentiate between the footprint on the ground and total floor area of ground, first, second, or whatever, point one. So I think your comment about the size of the footprint is relevant. But we are where we are. I mean, it is retrospective, it's there, and we have to judge and make a decision today on the application in front of us, which is retrospective for what it is and the use it's being used for.
Thank you, Joe.
Would like to...
Okay, so whilst the floor area would be larger than the previous structures occupying that part of the site, we've assessed it in terms of whether it constitutes limited infill rather than looking at the volume or footprint of the replacement building. We have to assess the application that's been submitted to us, and you know, in this case, they've presented potentially a business need for that, but mezzanine in terms of providing dry storage that's not on the ground floor, potentially at risk of I suppose flooding or damp. So yeah, that's all I can really add to that.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you. Not wanting to drag it out, but the issue of retrospective applications is quite clear in this case, because the characters have made quite a number of applications, two of which have been refused, one of which has been agreed. So they should have known to apply for this. And what concerns me is, as already Councillor Healy's already commented, the next thing is you can see a retrospective application for it to be an addition to a dwelling. So is there any way of strengthening the condition that it should not be used as a dwelling, to say even if the application is made retrospectively?
I think not, but I'll pass to the officers. I think the condition is pretty firm in what it says. I mean, if you want to read it again, by all means do, but I'm content with what we've put. Mr. Ashcroft, perhaps you could...
Chairman, if I can try and help you here. I take the view that I think other members have expressed that condition one is entirely robust and entirely practical for the circumstances in which we find ourselves here. In terms of the retrospective nature of this application and indeed other planning applications, plainly retrospective applications, or slightly unfortunately, you have to consider retrospective applications as you would any other planning application. And as some members have said, albeit with a smile on their faces, you have the advantage that you can see what it's like rather than coming to a judgment. If it's of any help to you, retrospective applications are as frustrating to officers as they are to members. In terms of that broader question of can we try to put additional restrictions on what the applicant may or may not do here, I think the short answer to that is no, because the applicant isn't a material consideration. It's the details of the application that are material considerations. And without wishing to over-egg what the other Andrew would have said, plainly, if you get further retrospective applications, you treat those on their merits. So those are the golden rules. But again, it appears as though members are comfortable with what's being built here and the conditions which would apply to it, should you be minded to grant retrospective consent. Thank you, Chairman.
Sound advice. Thank you. Councillor Gowland.
Thank you. I would really be incredibly unhappy if we had to waste all the energy gone into this building to pull it down again. But I stand by what I said. You know, I can think of examples where people wanted to build garages, kitchens inside courtyards. This does not lie in the middle of the village. It lies effectively on the edge. There's a tennis court behind it. You can see what's going to happen to that tennis court next. This is not, I don't think, infill, and we can see where this is going. I'll probably abstain because I don't want it pulled down really in the end. But this is not consistent with the Greenbelt policy.
Well, you make your point. Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Yes, well, I take the point that the condition is perhaps robustly drawn. I'm just wondering about the bit in brackets at the end, which is the reasons for the condition, which doesn't cover everything that the officer mentioned of the reasons for having the condition. The site does not possess sufficient amenity or is otherwise suitable. I think in particular, it would be helpful if the flood risk issue could be mentioned in that context. Thank you.
I'll defer to Andrew again because I don't think we'd want to put the flood risk words in, would we? I mean, that is a fact that you can get from the maps, the flood risk maps anyway, for anywhere. However, over to you.
Indeed, and I think that's right, Chairman. And again, my understanding of what the case officer has explained here is that we're not in a critical area of flood risk here, and therefore it may be unnecessary. It may be something that we could put in as a note to applicant to remind the applicant of the issue here and where it lies within the Environment Agency flood risk zone, but it doesn't appear material to the reason for that condition.
I think that's a good suggestion. Put a note. And again,
it does appear to me that if it was converted to a building, then they would go back to the reasons in that bracketed area. And the question is really, are those reasons robust as opposed to the actual condition being robust?
I understand what you say to a degree, but I think, you know, we've said it and we say it again. We're judging on the application in front of us, and it's retrospective. We are where we are, and that's what we must stick with. What happens in the future is anybody's guess. I don't look into the future. I don't think any of us can. If it happens, if something's changed, then it will come back as a planning application. So I think we need to draw a line on that one. We seem to be done. We have a proposer in Councillor Gray and seconded by Councillor Butler, which takes us to the vote, I think. So all those in favour of the officer's recommendation on the report, raise your hands now, please. Thank you. Any against? I don't think there's any abstentions, but 2 against. Oh, an abstention. And 1 abstention. 2 against, was it? Yes. And Councillor Gowland. Yes, Councillor Gowland and Councillor Healy were against, and Councillor Thomas abstained. I think the numbers should stack up there. Yeah. Thank you. I and fellow county councillors, I think, will now leave the room, and we'll hand over to Councillor Maureen Stockwood as the Vice Chairman to conclude the business of the afternoon. And thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you, councillors. Those remaining, anyway. As you can see, this is the one that we looked at last time. It's the Nottinghamshire County Council's Children's and Families that are the applicant. And it's the erection of 120 place temporary school learning village accommodation with temporary lit access road and permanent lit access path. Associated areas of soft play, canopies, car parking and surface water balancing pond. We go straight to hopefully a very small presentation because we had a long one last time. I understand there's very little alteration. So Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just make sure anyone viewing online has same access to the documents as anyone in the room. You're quite right, Chairman. Members are advised there is a late rep for this application, and it's merely a clarification that the ward members are raising no objection to the proposed revisions. Again, you are correct. Members will hopefully recall that you had sight of this item last month. I'm conscious that Councillor Bailey wasn't at that meeting, so for the benefit of all in the room, I will give you a quick guided update. As Councillor Mrs. Stockwood has taken us through, it is an application for a temporary school. Permission was granted in June this year by the County Council for a permanent school on the site. That school is needed for the local community. That school is is needed by September next year, 9 months' time, September 2022. The permanent school will not be open by that time. Therefore, the County Council are looking for a temporary school that will be available for the children of the area to be educated in whilst they complete construction of the permanent school, at which point the temporary school would be removed. There are other infrastructure features required because to the south of the red line image on your screen at the moment is a housing development that is currently under construction. Apologies, this plan is reliant on OS data and therefore not as up to date as we would like it to be. Similar, the aerial photography that was submitted by the applicants. However, I can furnish you with a aerial extract from our good friends at Google. So you'll see to the west of that image, there is a new housing development that is nearing completion. And to the south of the site, which is this location here, a housing development currently under construction with the site of the permanent school here, and the site of the proposed temporary school is in this location. As a result, the access for the temporary school is proposed to be a continuation along this line with a permanent footpath connecting into a footway that runs north-south through the image, and a temporary roadway that would allow access for the workers at the school, so the teachers, the staff working there, deliveries, collections, things like that, but not for parents. Parents would have access no further than the existing hammerhead, which is at the end of Sheepwash Way, which is the main spine road that runs out in this location here. So this is the plan that members commented on last month. The fundamental changes, and I'll get you to a couple of plans in a moment just to indicate this, is an increase in the width of the footpath here, because at the moment the footpath terminates onto a section of pavement that's got a raised curb down onto the carriageway level, then up again. What the County Council proposed to do is extend that across here to the point where there is a dropped curb. So anyone who may have mobility issues, pushchairs, prams, bikes, scooters, all those fun things trying to navigate a raised curb would be able to get access across without necessarily having to traipse across a wet turfed area, particularly at this time of year. The other modification proposed is resiting of this building from this location to a location here to ease the construction. And there are some minor revisions to the shape and the size of this particular element of the building, which is the school canteen assembly area. So it's a photograph. This is looking down Sheepwash Way towards the current hammerhead that exists at the end of that site. Jumping forward, we can see that the footway has been put in at the moment. The proposed roadway would run along this site here, permanent school in this location, temporary school in this location, copse of woodland in the middle, which would be retained. Again, stepping onto that footway, you would see that there's a ditch running across this image. The roadway would straddle that, run across and provide vehicular access for the staff and workers within the school building. Again, jumping down this path at the moment, we will look right, if I've got memory of which image is coming up next.
up into the neighbouring development that I showed you on the images. We then spin back looking at where we've come from and continuing to turn in a clockwise fashion. We look down the existing right of way with the temporary school site on the right hand side. Moving down that footway, again, temporary school in this location, and looking back again at the site with the woodland that would be retained. So that's the red line plan for the area. That's the topographical plan. This is the proposed changes that members are being asked to consider on. I would remind you that you are only a consultee. We are not the determining authority in this instance. That's the role of the county council. So I can flick backwards and forwards like this and play a game of spot the differences for members' benefit. So this is what we're being asked to comment on. So you'll notice this building was originally proposed to be here. They move ever so slightly and are put in a line. This building here, helps if I go the right way, changes ever so slightly in shape. And again, the footway I referred you to previously across that point of the site. They are fundamentally the changes between what you were asked to consider last month and what you're being asked to consider today. The only other change is, again, some images of the buildings that are proposed to go on the site, some elevations showing that they are single-storey flat roof structures, some sections through the site with the relevant sections in relation to the existing residential development we see here. You can see the distances involved and the scales of buildings we're talking about. This is the reinstatement plan, as the county council have termed it, which again shows that the buildings would be removed from the site because that would become the outside play area, sports pitches, etc. for the primary school. The roadway would be removed, but the footway would be retained along with that extension to where the drop curb would be to facilitate those travelling by pushchair, buggy, bike, scooter, however, and a section of paved right of way that I showed you the images looking at, which is currently just a turf track, again to allow access to the sports fields there. Ultimately, they are the minimal changes that are before members for consideration this afternoon. Officers are recommended that members respond to the county council advising that the borough council doesn't have any additional comments over and above those that were offered to the county council last month, and those comments are set out within your agenda papers within the minutes. I think it's pages 3 to 9. Back to you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. And technology, wonderful. That really let us consider what was before and what was now. So I've been indicated by Councillor Jones first. Wishes to speak. There are no speakers.
Thanks for the clear presentation. I move the officer's recommendation.
Okay, thank you. So you're proposing. Councillor Thomas, sorry.
Yes, I'm happy to second the recommendation, Chair. I comment that we haven't, our concerns about the access and the road safety haven't gone away, but this plan is no worse than the previous plan. That's the ward member's view. Thank you.
If it helps, Chairman, the letter that went to County Council did emphasise that within the opening paragraph that members' concerns about the access and asking them to give due consideration to it, and that will certainly be the case in any comment that we refer back to them, depending on what members decide this afternoon.
Thank you. I was just going to either propose or second the recommendation about no additional comments. Thank you.
Sorry. I can't.
I think we just need to clarify what the vote's for, and without wanting to speak on your behalf, Chairman, I presume it's all those in favour of the recommendation.
Right. Okay. All those in favour?
That's unanimous.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So as it's unanimous. And at 15:34, I declare the meeting closed. Thank you all for your attendance.